Greetings, booktubers, and welcome back to Grammaticus Books. What we got online for you here today, after I straighten this camera just a smidge there, we're going back in time. We're going back to the 1960s for classic science fiction, and it's a good one. We've got The Berserker Wars by Fred Saberhagen. This is the first in the Berserker novels. Actually, it's just called Berserker. There is a Berserker Wars book, and these are generally referred to as the Berserker Wars. I think there are a total of 17 novels that started with 1963 to 2005 that Fred Saberhagen wrote these. But this is the first book that collects 11 stories. It's 11 short stories about the Berserker Wars that are loosely connected and put in chronologically. And then they have characters that appear in the short stories going through it that tie the short stories together and make it a composite novel. So you've got a composite novel of 11 short stories that all form one larger novel, one story about the Berserkers. So what is the Berserkers about? I think the easiest way to explain the Berserkers is just to read the back of the first book here, which gives you a great overview. Berserker, the Death Machines. Long ago, in a distant part of the galaxy, two alien races met and fought a war of mutual extinction. The sole legacy of that war was the weapon that ended it, the Death Machines, the Berserkers. Guided by self-aware computers more intelligent than any human, these world-sized battlecraft carved a swath of death through the galaxy until they arrived at the outskirts of the fledgling empire of man. These are the stories of the frail creatures who must meet this monstrous and implacable enemy, and who, by fighting it to a standoff, become the savior of all living things. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's really the first novel of its kind to have an enemy of this type that's a galaxy-spanning enemy of animated machines, AI-driven machines that are bent on destroying all life. Now, I know what you're saying. There are plenty of stories prior to this about individual machines and individual robots that went off the rails and had to be put down with some force. But this is the first set of novels where you have the AI machines, the robots, organized into a world-spanning, solar system-spanning, galaxy-spanning force that is out to destroy all of humanity and all of life. And that's really where these that story, that theme originates, is right here. And there are a lot of previous, or I should say subsequent, science fiction novels and genres that owe a lot to Fred Saberhagen and the Berserker Wars. Like the Cylons are the same sort of thing. You've got the Doomsday Machine in Star Trek. You've got the Necrons in Warhammer. And of course, you've got Skynet and the Terminators. They all owe their existence to one degree or another from Mr. Fred Saberhagen right here, who started this in 1963. So the 11 short stories in here that comprise this book were written between 1963 and 1967, and they're very good. Fred Saberhagen started writing these stories when he was 30 years old. He was a former Air Force enlisted man who was in the Korean War. He came back from the Korean War, and he started working for Motorola as an electrical technician. And personally, I think that background, having been in the Korean War as a member of the Air Force, seeing all of these machines, these flying machines that were basically death machines that were taking their payloads over into North Korea and fighting the Koreans along the DMZ, and then working with Motorola as an electrical technician, I think that was probably seminal for him in germinating that idea to bring forth these stories about world-spanning, galaxy-spanning machines bent on the destruction of all life. So I think his background had a lot to do with his writing. But he is about 30 years old when he starts writing these and selling them to Galaxy Magazine. And I will say this, the writing in here, it's a great read. It's a super fun read. I highly recommend it if you can pick it up. But it's not polished. He is not a polished author at this point. There are a lot of really sort of disjointed segues between scenes, and when he's trying to interconnect his scenes and make those transitions, they can be handled clumsily at times. And there were more than a few paragraphs that I had to read once, twice, three times to try to figure out, Fred, what the hell are you trying to say here? Because it doesn't make any sense based on what's come before it and what comes after it. And I think in his head, he knew what he was trying to get out. But at the age of 30, as a as an electrical technician working for Motorola. He didn't quite have the skill at this point to express himself as eloquently as a more professional writer would at that time. Now, I'm really interested to see how he does as he progresses with these books, because when I went to the used bookstore to pick this one up, not only did they have that one, but they had the second in the Berserker War series, Brother Assassin. Look at that cover. That cover's by Michael Whalen. And I want to say I reviewed another book that had a cover by Michael Whalen. I'm going to have to research that one. And then they also had the fourth book in the series, which is Berserker Man. And I'm really looking forward to seeing these and seeing if Mr. Saberhagen's skill as a writer increases, that he hones it over the course of writing these. And he wrote these from 1963 all the way up to 2005. So this was definitely a money machine for him. I think there's 17 books total. And I got to guess that at some point he was just cranking these things out in order to pay the mortgage. But here are these original books where he's got the original ideas, where it's fresh in his mind. These are really good stories. I really enjoyed this book. The characters that kind of join and bring these 11 short stories together in the Berserker, the main ones are Johan Carlson, who becomes sort of the savior of the human race, and his half-brother Felipe Nogara, who is the evil guy who is in charge of, I think, the planet Estiel, and is one of the most powerful people in the Empire of Man. And he's jealous of his brother's victories and is working behind the scenes to remove his brother, who really is the only person who's able to organize humanity into a cohesive battle force in order to fight off the Berserkers. And it all culminates in this battle at an area of the solar system, outside of the solar system actually, called the Stone Place. So they bring the Berserkers in, the fleet of humanity goes out, and they have a big battle, sort of an Armageddon-like battle at the Stone Place, and they're able to stop the Berserkers. And the other interesting thing about this is it's the time where an author comes up with the idea that man's greatest flaw, his barbarism and his savagery, as man is moving out into the universe and meeting these other races that are already established out in the universe, who were able to establish and expand by being peaceful and learning how to coexist, that savagery of a new race that's still coming out becomes the savior, that becomes the character trait that is needed by the rest of the universe in order to save them from the Berserkers, because man still knows how to fight and how to fight well and how to be a savage and oppose the Berserkers. And that winds up being one of the strengths that's needed to fight the Berserkers back to a standstill. Of course, they don't win because you've got 17 books. So you've got to keep the Berserkers in place and keep fighting them for about another 30 years or so of padding Mr. Saberhagen's paychecks. But that's also interesting about that thing with savagery and man, because that also, I think that heavily influenced another science fiction series that I do enjoy, and that was the Man-Kazin War. So that one's kind of all over the place in quality. But it's sort of the same idea. You've got this implacable foe, the Kazin, that attack the solar system and the galaxy, and there's this coalition of races that includes man, and man is the only one that's still primitive and savage enough as us barely evolved primates that are needed then to go back and fight back and battle back the Kazin and oppose them, with the idea that they're the ones who can fight and wreak savagery on the same level as these Kazin aliens. And that's the same sort of thing that's going on here. So my favorite story out of these 11 was hands down the last one in the book, which is called The Face of the Deep. And that's about Johan Carlson. So Johan Carlson defeats the Berserkers at the Stone Place. And the Berserkers come to the conclusion that Johan Carlson must die at any cost. No matter what the sacrifice to the Berserker fleet, they have to remove Johan Carlson if they're going to complete their quest of destroying all life in the galaxy. And his brother, Felipe Nogara, has actually had him put into a deep sleep and removed in order to make sure that he doesn't become a political threat to his rule of Estiel and the Empire of Man. And Johan Carlson gets out. The Berserkers are sending parties in to try to search out what his fate is, because they don't believe that he's dead, which is what Nogara is telling the Empire of Man. And he actually is brought out of deep sleep. And then he leads the Berserkers away from this new fleet of ships that is going out. And he leads them down into the event horizon of a black hole where he gets trapped. And that's where the last story, The Face of the Deep, picks up. Make sure I got that title right. The Face of the Deep. So Johan Carlson is trapped in the gravity well right at the edge of the event horizon. And they're trying to rescue him, the Empire of Man, to bring him back so that he can continue the Berserker Wars and continue to oppose them. And the Berserkers are trying to get down to him right here on the edge of the gravity well where you get sucked all the way in. And they're trying to fool Carlson into opening the ship up and coming out where the laws of physics are twisted right there at the edge of the event horizon. And it's a fantastic story. I really loved it. And it's really it was the perfect story to end on. And it's really given me the heart and the impetus to go on and start up with Brother Assassin for the next one. And when I finish Brother Assassin, I'll let you know how this one goes. I think this is a full novel. It's not a collection of short stories. It's an actual full novel in itself, but it's not real big. And I do love that cover art there by Michael Whalen. And speaking of the cover art for this first one here is Boris Vallejo, which blew me away. So it's signed right there. You've got Boris's signature down here. And I knew and was aware of Boris being a fantasy painter of huge fame. I mean, he's immensely talented. I personally don't care for his style of fantasy art. And that's a whole nother video in itself that I'll have to do, comparing Frazetta versus Boris Vallejo and their skill levels and talents, but also their appeals as painters as well. For me, I'm not a huge fan of Boris's fantasy art, but I do really like this science fiction art he's got going here. This doesn't look like a painting that he put a ton of time into. It was probably a short project for him just to get a quick paycheck for doing this cover. But the third one here, the third book, which is actually the fourth in the series, Berserker Man, is also by Boris. And I just love that cover. That is a fantastic, classic science fiction cover art that you just don't see on today's science fiction novels. It just doesn't look that good. It doesn't have that much character and heart and soul in it. There's no AI program that has smoothed everything out. All the human little tiny mistakes in it that give it that life, that bring it to life, are all still present there, and those great colors, and what a layout. And I was really impressed with that because I don't like Boris Vallejo that much as an artist. At least I didn't until I picked up these covers. I was like, man, his science fiction art really rocks. So that's Berserker. It's an excellent book. It went on for a long time. It really influenced a ton of science fiction going forward into the future. It's still influencing science fiction today. And it was really interesting. I think Mr. Saberhagen, that his very eventful background certainly gave rise to his ability to come up with these stories and write them as well as he did, even if it was a little clumsy at first, a little as he's developing his professional skills. And so I'll see how he's able to smooth those over in the other books, and I'll let you know how those go. But I really enjoyed it. If you get a chance to check those out, check those out. What I'm currently reading, I'll bring that up too, this is what I'm currently working my way through, and it's The Road of Azrael, which is another collection of short stories by Robert E. Howard. This is the second book of Robert E. Howard's Outremer Crusader stories. I'm about halfway through it, and it's a pretty quick read, so I should have this one done pretty soon as well. So I'll get that one up for you guys too. I would say this one's not quite as good. The stories in here aren't quite at the same level as the Crusader Outremer stories that were collected in Sowers of the Thunder. And I did a video on Sowers of the Thunder. That is a fantastic book. Go back and check out that video on Sowers of the Thunder. If you're a Robert E. Howard fan, if you're a Conan fan, and even if you don't like Robert E. Howard's non-Conan characters, I'm telling you that story, that collection of stories, Sowers of the Thunder, is really good. You owe it to yourself to give that one a look. But anyway, we're wrapping it up for today's video. It's Thursday night after a long day of work. I'm going to get this uploaded, and hopefully everything will go smooth, and YouTube won't give me any trouble, and the IT gods won't give me any troubles to upload this thing, and I'll have it out on Friday morning. So thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it. We got Berserker Man. We got Brother Assassin, and the one that I just finished, the one to start off the whole series, Berserker by Fred Saberhagen. So that's it. Take care, be safe, and hopefully I'll be seeing you in the future.